Before the watch ever reaches your wrist, the buying experience already tells you a lot about Apple's priorities. The packaging is clean, the parts list is simple, and the fine print reminds you that the watch is really an ecosystem product, not just a small screen with a strap. With Apple Watch Series 10, that matters even more because the thinner body is designed to disappear during the day while still handling fitness tracking, notifications, payments, and health alerts. Apple Care gets a big call out too, which makes sense for something you wear through workouts, sleep, travel, and the occasional doorway collision. Once it is on the wrist, the thin design is the first thing you appreciate, because a smartwatch has to clear a very low bar before it can be great. It cannot be annoying. Swiping through settings, tapping apps, and checking quick information all feel better when the case sits flatter and does not fight your sleeve. Series 10 keeps the familiar Apple Watch language, with a rounded square display and digital crown. But the slimmer profile makes the whole thing feel less like a gadget strapped on top of your arm, and more like everyday gear that happens to be smart. Unboxing an iPhone box next to an Apple Watch is a useful reminder that these devices are meant to work as a pair. The watch can do plenty by itself, but its best tricks come from being close to the phone you already use all day. Setup, notifications, calls, health data, music, and camera controls all flow through that connection. For Series 10, the thin design does not change that relationship, but it makes the watch easier to keep on longer, which is exactly how health features become useful instead of theoretical. Retail demo tables always make the Apple Watch feel a little futuristic because the watch is sitting beside a larger touch display that explains what the tiny screen can do. That contrast is the whole point. Apple is squeezing a surprisingly complete interface into something smaller than a cookie. The Series 10 design leans into that idea with a wider, cleaner viewing experience while keeping the body slim enough for daily wear. You can glance at controls, toggle focus modes, start workouts, or check health trends without fishing for your phone every 5 minutes. The band system is still one of the most practical parts of the Apple Watch story. Opening the package and seeing different colors and loop styles makes it clear that Apple expects people to treat the watch as both a tool and a personal object. A thinner Series 10 body benefits from that flexibility because the watch can shift from gym strap to office band without feeling bulky in either place. The right band also affects comfort, especially if you use sleep tracking, heart measurements, or workouts where a loose fit can ruin the data. Health features are where the Apple Watch stops being just a notification screen and becomes something more personal. On-wrist trend views, activity context, and body metrics are useful because they are available in the moment, not buried later in an app you forgot to open. A thin case helps here more than it sounds, because the best health tracker is the one you actually keep wearing. Series 10 is built around that quiet consistency. Check a trend, adjust a habit, move on with your day, and maybe learn something before it becomes a bigger issue. Band details can look tiny, but they decide whether the watch feels premium after months of use. The pins, holes, snaps, and material finish all matter, because this is the part you touch every morning. A thinner watch body puts even more attention on the strap, since the band becomes a bigger part of the overall feel. When everything lines up cleanly, the watch sits flatter and feels secure without being tight. That matters for comfort, but it also helps the sensors stay where they need to be during movement and overnight tracking. Inside the box, Apple keeps the layout almost ritualistic. Watch body, band pieces, charging puck, paperwork, and not much else. That simplicity is helpful if this is your first Apple Watch, because assembly is obvious and setup is guided by the iPhone. With Series 10, the unboxing may be minimal, but the experience you're setting up is not. You're adding a screen for quick decisions, a workout companion, a sleep tracker, a health log, and a tiny remote control for parts of your phone. The thin design just makes all of that easier to accept daily. Seeing older Apple Watch models lined up in a store puts the Series 10 design in context. Apple has been refining the same basic idea for years. Make the screen more useful, make the body easier to wear, and keep the interface familiar enough that people do not have to relearn everything. Price tags and display cards change, but the core question stays the same. Is this comfortable enough, useful enough, and durable enough to live on your wrist? A thinner Series 10 answers that question by reducing the physical trade-off of wearing one all day. The colorful band and bright interface give the watch a more playful side, which is easy to forget when talking about sensors and health. Apple Watch is also a tiny dashboard for weather, timers, messages, music, and quick controls that you can use one-handed. The thinner Series 10 case makes those casual interactions feel less intrusive, especially when you're tapping through apps at a desk or during a walk. It is not trying to replace the phone for everything. It is trying to handle the small stuff before the phone has to come out. Pairing and setup are not glamorous, but they are the gateway to everything that makes the watch useful. The on-screen prompt to bring the iPhone nearby is classic Apple. Remove as much friction as possible and let the devices recognize each other. Once paired, Series 10 becomes part of the health and notification loop almost immediately. The thinner body matters from that first setup moment because you're deciding whether this is something you will wear constantly. If it feels light, sits cleanly, and does not demand attention, it has a much better chance of staying on. After setup, the watch becomes a background companion, quietly waiting until there is something worth showing. That is the ideal mode for wearable tech. You do not want a wrist computer begging for attention all day. You want one that can surface a message, track movement, log health data, and disappear again. Series 10's thinner shape supports that rhythm. It is easier to wear while typing, sleeping, cooking, or exercising, and those boring moments are exactly where the best data comes from. The watch gets smarter because it is present, not because it is loud. One underrated Apple Watch trick is how it turns the iPhone camera into something more flexible. The camera remote lets you frame a group photo, start a timer, or trigger the shutter from your wrist, which is surprisingly handy once you remember it exists. On Series 10, the bigger feeling screen and thinner case make these little utility features nicer to use, because quick controls are easier to read and the watch is less in the way. It is a small example of the larger Apple Watch pitch. The best features are often the ones that save a tiny annoyance. Finishing with the band is fitting because comfort decides whether all those health and smart features matter. Snap it in cleanly, fit it well, and the thinner Series 10 becomes something you can forget about until it helps.